Throughout the pandemic, COVID has raised many issues around rights and freedoms in the Australian Constitution. Now, it's been a point of significant concern, especially for Victorian woman Jackie Dundee, and the treatment that tennis star Novak Djokovic received from the Immigration Minister Alex Hawke. Now, Minister Hawke, Ms Dundee says, actually abused his position and based his decisions to cancel Djokovic's visa on personal opinion rather than adhere to due law process. Now, Ms Dundee has now taken her fight to the High Court of Australia, lodging an application challenging Minister Hawke's decision and the validity of the Immigration Act. Joining us today is Jackie Dundee to talk about it. Welcome, Jackie.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate the opportunity to let Australians know what's going on.
You're welcome. Now, it's a huge task you've undertaken here, taking Minister Hawke to the High Court of Australia. What made you decide to do it?
It is, it's very concerning that it appears that there is no law in this country that's being adhered to. The government, they seem to have a blatant and utter disdain for the Constitution. So there is no head of power in relation to health under sections of the Constitution to provide any source of legislative power for the Immigration Minister to deny an entry visa to anybody who is not vaccinated, or to enforce a personal opinion as to the merits of vaccination. This is not the due process of law. Novak was treated very unfairly and unlawfully.
Now, what do you say to people that bring up that Australians were actually prohibited from coming back as well? Would that come under the same
Yes.
Resolution you're seeking?
Well, that is one of the reasons. It's not just to correct it for Novak. All Australians, this is on behalf of all Australians, because we have standing in this matter. The same thing is applicable to us. So it affects all of us. That's why it's so important to have this judicial error corrected.
Yeah. Now, the original judge overruled his banning, and I think his words were, well, what else could the man have possibly done on his entry, only to have Minister Hawke override it because he has discretion. Is it the actual discretion that you're arguing against, or the decision?
Well, it's both. He has discretionary powers, yes, under Section 133C of the Immigration Act. But his discretion and his personal opinion must be based upon law. There's got to have law about it. It's as if we've got the separation of powers here in Australia. They came in force in 1903. So the separation of powers were the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. Now, it appears as though the legislative and the executive are trying to override the judicial, and Minister Hawke had absolutely no right to make a discretional decision and override a judge's finding. That if any other Australian did that, we would have been charged with contempt of court. It's unheard of. We must make sure that due process of law is adhered to in this country. Otherwise, we're in a lawless country, and that affects all Australians.
Yeah. Now, we've seen other people banned for character reasons, not of good character, for people who held abhorrent or views counter to Australian views banned. Now, Novak was none of those things, was he? He's actually done quite a lot for Australia in his previous visits here, and is held in quite high esteem, not only by the Serbian community in Australia, but Australians.
Absolutely. He's a very honourable man, and not only being the superstar tennis player that he is, he has donated so much to charities for the bushfires, for example, the floods, etc. He's donated millions of dollars to this country, and for him to be treated the way he was is That's abhorrent.
Mm.
There was no law behind anything. Novak should have been, if the due process had been followed, we've got the Federal Biosecurity Act. Now, Novak should have been put to the side by biosecurity officers, and if he was labouring under an infectious disease, because that is the measures of quarantine. It is to restrict somebody if they are showing signs or symptoms or labouring under an infectious disease, then they can be quarantined. But that was not the case with Novak.
Now, why do you think there wasn't a universal outcry to this? There were some people saying, oh, he's just a millionaire tennis player. Why should he be treated any differently to the rest of us? Do we have a problem with our understanding of the Constitution or our ignorance of it as Australians?
Absolutely. And look, that has definitely been by design. They removed the Constitution from the curriculum back in the 70s. And this is one of the main reasons we are in this situation today, is because people are ignorant of their rights and all of the guarantees and protections that are inherent within our Constitution. A lot of Australians are not even aware that we have a Constitution. They know America has one, but they're not aware of ours. And it is the supreme law of this land, must be adhered to.
It really seemed that it had become the wrong focus on things like, why should he get in rather than why should anyone be excluded?
But this is the whole point of this. This is why we have standing in the High Court to have this matter heard, because there has been judicial error in this case. So it must be corrected because it follows through. It's a domino effect for all Australians. We are under this same ruling. So a judicial error remains in place. That decision remains in place unless it's challenged. And the only court that you can have a judicial error heard in is the next highest court. So Djokovic's case was in the federal court. The only court to hear this matter is the High Court.
Now, Jackie, does it come under the heading of a judicial error, given it was made by a minister on a discretionary call? So it wasn't the court that handed it down. The court handed down a decision saying he could come in, and then Minister Hawke overrode that. So are we challenging the decision, the ability for the discretionary, or the decision in the court?
The ability for the discretionary power,
right?
Because it is constrained by law. And in this instance, it was exercised for purposes which go outside the power from which the Migration Act of 1958 confers its discretion. It derives its force from the Constitution. And this is the act that the Minister Hawke was acting under.
Right. So what's the next step, Jackie? When do we head off to the High Court?
The matter has been lodged. It is sitting there pending approval. So an email has been sent off to the High Court. What occurred was the writ of summons was lodged into the High Court with the accompanying affidavit. Now, I think it was within 48 hours, there was a response from the High Court advising that we needed to seek leave of a justice to have the matter heard. Now, this comes under a High Court Form 31. That was then filed, or lodged, I should say, on the 19th of April with an accompanying affidavit as well in support of the Form 31. So it's interesting that with the writ of summons, they responded within a 48-hour period. We have followed their instruction and we have heard nothing since the 19th of April. There has been a follow-up email requesting an update as to where this matter, the we just want an update on why it is still sitting pending approval. And this is the thing I'm unsure of. How long do they have to decide? It's got to be filed. It's got to be filed, and then a hearing date has got to be given.
Right. Well, Jackie, hopefully you're successful in getting your next update and getting the court date. Please keep us in the loop and let us know how you're going.
Yes, absolutely. You know, as we said, this is of great importance to all Australians because it affects all of us coming in and out of the country. So it's very important it gets sorted out. I can understand why the Serbian community, I think even the Serbian Prime Minister, were questioning whether there was any law within Australia, because with this kind of behaviour, it appears as though there is no law. You cannot, law isn't based on personal opinions. It's got to follow due process. So it really is up to we, the people, to stand our ground and make sure things are done correctly.
All right, Jackie, thanks so much for your time and good luck with it.
Thank you very much, Michael. Appreciate it.